They say that you are the average of the friends and company you keep. So I want us to improve our average together. I want us to become smarter, more successful, healthier, happier, and more fulfilled in our everyday lives. Think about it. The stronger we are as individuals, the more we can serve those around us. I'll be interviewing friends that happen to be experts in their field, and I invite you to join in on the conversation. So, welcome to the I Have Cool Friends podcast, a show that sparks inspirational conversations with experts about business, wellness, and personal development. Welcome back to the I Have Cool Friends podcast. I am honored to have Courtney Reum on the show today. He's an incredible entrepreneur, product developer, and the co-founder of the Los Angeles-based investment firm In13. So thank you, Courtney, for being willing to share some of your knowledge today on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here and catch up.
Yeah, you're in LA right now. I am back in the Midwest where you're from. So it's good to, even though it's just on a Zoom call, to see a little bit of what LA looks like right now.
Yes. And even just seeing your face here makes me feel my Midwest roots.
Good. I'm glad we're bringing it full circle here. Well, Courtney, like I mentioned, is a Midwest guy. He went to Columbia and Harvard Business School and was a former Goldman Sachs investment maker. After helping take Under Armour and Vitamin Water public about 12 years ago, he started his own ventures with his brother, Carter, like creating my personal favorite vodka brand, VeeV. It was the world's first acai spirit. And before selling in 2016, it was honored as one of the 500 fastest selling private companies in America. Courtney has been listed as one of Goldman Sachs' top 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs. And Courtney and Carter then launched the investment in brand development firm In13, which focused on startup consumer product companies whose intention and brand messaging appeals to the trends that interest millennials in health, environmental concerns, and achievement. And oh yeah, he wrote a book called Shortcut Your Startup. So you have not been busy the last 12 years at all, right?
Exactly.
And just to catch everybody up on how we met, I actually heard Courtney speak at a Rising Glen event. And I was the super fan waiting in line just to tell him how much that I appreciated the vodka brand VeeV. And I think your response was like, that's such a past life, but thank you.
I think that was like shortly after we sold it. So I was trying to make sure that I was, kind of turning the page and on to the next chapter. But you know what? Now, if you said that now, I appreciate it more than ever because it just warms your heart in an unexpected way when someone says that now. Or I was at a restaurant, actually at a hotel last night, and I saw it on the shelf. So it's nice to feel like you have some legacy.
Yeah. Every once in a while, someone now congratulates me on going to the Olympics, which was in 2008. And I say thank you. And I'm like, wow, that was such a long time ago. Can I still, does it still exist for me to say thank you for something that happened so long ago?
Well, I think your legacy gives back more, but yes, you just trumped mine. But I get to see mine out and about, but they will never take that away from you. It's being an Olympian was on my bucket list for a long time, but we came up a little short.
Oh, well, what sport?
Well, that's the problem. We didn't really have a sport. I mean, I at one point thought I was going to play professional soccer, and then dabbled in some other things, but it wasn't very close. So let's move on from there.
Okay, all right. Well, you definitely dabbled in business, so that kind of became your sport, right?
Indeed, and it is a very tough and very well-rounded sport. So yes, I kind of took up because at one point I did kind of have the choice of trying to maybe pursue a further career in sports or going to work on Wall Street at Goldman Sachs. And one was not waiting for the other, and they certainly didn't have very much overlap.
Right. That's true. Well, speaking of Goldman Sachs, you were doing really well there. And at a young age, how was it for you to go from a stable income, a really quote unquote typical job, to have the confidence from working with entrepreneurs, then to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Well, if I could harken back to, I guess, probably about 2006, 2007, you were probably in the heat of training for the Olympics. I was working at Goldman, and, you're just in your bubble. I love the Tony Robbins phrase, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I don't even know who those 5 people were, but I know that all of them were other peers, working in investment banking because I was doing it 100 hours a week. And, at the time you only really did, I would say 4 things. You stayed at Goldman Sachs or something like it. You left to go work at a private equity, venture capital didn't really exist. Hedge funds were hot, so I was offered some jobs there. Or you just get really burnt out, throw your hands up in the air and, take a gap year, become a snowboarding instructor or something, which a few friends of mine did. And so, I was offered a job that for an enormous amount of money as a 25, 26-year-old, working at a hedge fund. And I remember having the moment of going, wow, what would I even do with that money? Like, I spend so little money because I work so much. But at the same time, being from Chicago, as you said, and very much kind of having a life goal of living West Coast, East Coast, and abroad before 30, I kind of also realized this was the moment. If I don't leave this, I say rat race, but I don't mean it in a negative way. But if I don't leave this life and this path that I'm on, both at Goldman and New York City, it's kind of now or never. And so I made what I think was a pretty brave decision, because none of my friends were entrepreneurs. We didn't even use that word. I don't even think I knew what venture capital was. So I made the decision to go work for Goldman Sachs in Australia, mainly because I thought it'd be a great life experience. And I used that as a springboard to kind of pull me out of one of the two things, New York City. And then that slowly kind of pulled me out of investment banking. And then ultimately after that year in Sydney, decided I was going to be an entrepreneur. And all my friends were like, what do you mean by entrepreneur? And hard to believe that was, barely over 10 years ago, I guess between 10 and 15 years ago now.
So what was it that gave you that spark to want to be an entrepreneur?
I get asked that, and I don't know that there's ever been a spark. I think it's been a lot of things. I think my parents, it's everything from, my parents were entrepreneurial without calling themselves that or knowing that. And on paper, it doesn't look like that. They worked for big companies, but I think they were entrepreneurial in the way that they lived their lives. They were entrepreneurial in the way that they picked up and moved and did things like we were entrepreneurial as a family. And then, so I do think some of that was dormant in me. I do think it's a case of, sometimes your parents do things where they take less risks so you can take more. And I think I always have had an appetite for risk. And, then again, nobody was really talking about entrepreneurship. And when I worked at Goldman, I was very lucky to, as you mentioned in the opening, work on things like Under Armour's IPO. And you watch a guy like Kevin Plank and you think, gosh, look, he's not that much older than I am. He's got a great idea, certainly a lot of moxie and grit. And if he can do it, I don't know if I can, but let's give it a whirl. So as people like him, or even, being, like you said, tangentially around things like vitamin water, all those things, I don't even think I realized how much they influenced me at the time. But then when I look back, those were all kind of maybe not the match points, but they were kind of the points along the way that added up to feeling like, you know what, I want to do something on my own.
Well, it worked out for you. But I want to go back to what you said earlier about you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with. So I don't know if you took a look at my website that launched yesterday, but it actually is the whole entire premise of the show is upping everyone's average and hoping that listeners can gain a little bit of knowledge from your expertise. So I love that you mentioned that, because I think it's really important to recognize the people and the things that you're surrounding yourself in your life with. So when you went to be an entrepreneur, obviously at Goldman Sachs, you were just naturally surrounded by lots of intelligent people. When you left to be an entrepreneur, who did you actively try to be surrounded with? Yeah,
I would say it's such a good point. And no, I did not see your website, but I will check it out after this. But I think it's, as I look back, it's like when I say I went to undergrad at Columbia, to me, maybe that was the smartest group of well-rounded people I've been around. People had different interests, but everyone was, for the most part, highly intelligent, highly motivated. Then you go to a place like Goldman Sachs or Harvard Business School where you're around super smart people, but in a more narrow scope or bandwidth. And then, like you said, you go out on your own. When people say, how did you start an alcohol brand? Again, you have to harken back. This is like 2007. The answer, no joke, was like Google, and more Google. And I think at first I was interested in surrounding myself with people in the industry because I knew nothing about it once I committed to starting a sustainable and organic vodka-esque substitute. And so that is the trick. I was trying to kind of learn how to become an entrepreneur simultaneously with learning how to learn the alcohol space, because there's truly no space where it is more, at least at the time, almost anyone in spirits, especially at a senior level, like they had some tie to it, some family connection. And so, it's not like the internet wasn't around, but you just didn't network or connect with people via like LinkedIn the way you do now. So it was very much Google, find one friend, ask them to introduce me to 2 more, and good people beget good people. So it was a much more one-to-one rather than one-to-many strategy back then.
obviously being an entrepreneur, you wear so many hats. And like you say, you have to Google how to do a lot of things, ask people how to do things, or you just figure it out. And so I think the most important thing to being an entrepreneur is that figure outable skill of knowing how to just make the waves smooth, right? So what would you say the number one most important trait is to being a successful entrepreneur?
Great question. I think you kind of I love what you just hit on, which is that we tend to revere, if you look at, I won't name names, but like any big famous tech company in the last 5 years, usually those people, he or she has some kind of like dominating quality where you can say, oh, the founder of WeWork was this, or the founder of Uber, or the founder of some company. And what's great is those qualities can usually get you pretty darn far, but maybe not all the way. And what tends to happen in that case is people focus on your strengths and the blind spots get overlooked. And the better you do, the more they get overlooked. What I look for now that I love in entrepreneurs, because we all tend to like things that we see in ourselves, which I think is one of my better qualities. I've got many bad qualities, but that's for another show. We can explore those with a different name. Is that I love people who know what they know and know what they don't know, because the more self-aware of what you are of what you don't know, then it's about, as they say, styles make fights. This is such a hyper specialized world where things are moving so quickly. And, we say things like good, better, best. Just being okay at something is not going to cut it in any facet of your business. So you need to say, okay, what am I, Courtney, best in class at? Or what is my group best in class at? And now can I figure out where to find the other pieces? Whereas I think the mindset used to be a little more put it all on your shoulders and go, oh, I'm good at everything. No one's good at everything. Realize what you're absolutely best in class at, and then surround yourself with the other pieces of the puzzle to kind of put that together.
When you started VeeV, you, like you mentioned, knew nothing about the alcohol industry. It was an already saturated market. So how do you feel like being new, how were you able to win in that industry so quickly? I think we felt really good about our product proposition. We were kind of at the tip of what I'll call kind of like better for you products. Of course, it's still alcohol, so drink it in moderation, but better ingredients, better quality, organic. And then we did, VeeV was infused with acai, or I guess is infused with acai and prickly pear and things like that, giving it a more interesting flavor profile, more mixability. And I always give people the VeeV challenge. If we have 3 drinks of yours and 3 drinks of mine, I bet you'll feel better on mine the next day. Having said that, if you do 7 or 8 of mine, you probably won't. But I think I think the proposition has to be differentiated. But alcohol was a great lesson in, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, doesn't really matter, because we had a product that I think a lot of people really like. Not everyone, but that's adult beverage for you. Is that that product without distribution doesn't matter, because consumers are. I wouldn't say they're lazy, but it's a path of least resistance, right? If I went into 10 bars and 2 of them had VeeV, probably I'll stop asking for VeeV. If I'm Tito's and I go into a bar and almost every bar has Tito's, they're probably going to keep asking for it. So it was a great lesson in product differentiation, all that. But I can honestly say for those first hundreds of bottles, then thousands, then tens of thousands of bottles, myself and my team, and we had a great team of people in the field, worked so hard to know where every bottle's buried, because we learned quickly, like doing marketing and a bunch of other stuff without the distribution to support it was kind of a waste. And it's unlike most industries, because most industries now, we really pride ourselves on being great at digital marketing and one-click selling, and you can't do any of that stuff with spirits. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not going to say that I haven't done the hangover challenge with VeeV, but I'm not going to say that I have done it. That's all I'm going to say about that. But it was going really well. What went into the decision to sell?
A lot of things, some were kind of in our control and some were out of our control. I actually think spirits is an interesting industry in that the better we did, the less we can control. As I said, when we were selling 1,000 bottles a month or 10,000 bottles a month, we actually felt like we really controlled where it went and had it in the right places, in the right hands. The better we did, we relied more on our distributors. And, don't get me wrong, a lot of them are great, hardworking folks, but they distribute Diageo and Pernod Ricard and huge brands that really pay their bills. So it's just hard to get share of mind. And, we were doing over 1 million bottles a year when we sold, and it was hard for us to see a path, how we go from 1 million bottles to 5 million or 10 million bottles. And so, much like a lot of industries, spirits are very profitable at scale. Subscale, it can be, not profitable. And so we basically had to make the decision: do we sell it, or do we kind of start a mini spirits conglomerate where we have a bunch of brands? And as much as spirits was a great experience, and I'm super grateful for it, and it's led to almost all the good things that have come in the last 5 years professionally, almost none of it would have happened without VeeV. I don't think we saw ourselves as entrepreneurs or socially conscious entrepreneurs that's first venture manifested itself in the form of alcohol, versus we weren't trying to be spirits barons. So I think from a personal point of view, we had gone pretty fast and pretty hard for a while. And so it just kind of felt like time.
You and Carter started M13, an investment firm which focuses on the next generation of household names. And in this world where everyone has a good idea, how can a company stand out?
Well, it is a world of lots of good ideas. And, my dad was a believer in the ideas are cheap, execution is dear. And I think you see that, right? There's it's almost hard now to say if something's a really good idea or a really bad idea, but if it's a really good idea, that and $2 will still get you on the subway. So, to me, it's not about the idea. It's about kind of how you lay out the so what of the idea. It's about, even if it's just starting and you're talking to someone, it's about the cocktail napkin sketch, or this leads to that, or the network effects, or whatever it is. So it's more like showing someone the roadmap or telling the story of how this could become something much bigger and much more interesting.
Gotcha. And what goes into your decision whether you will invest or not? I was checking out your website. You guys are investors in a lot of big time companies. What went into those decisions?
Yeah, I think, whether it's something like a Lyft or a Pinterest, or, we put in some of the first money on Ring the video doorbell. I wish I could say we always had a crystal ball. We don't, nobody does. But I do think, one of our mandates with M13 is really to be at the forefront of consumer behavior for the next decade and beyond. And so with the speed of innovation, I think it's just a matter of, I always say to people, oh, we just want to be like 6 months ahead. And everyone laughs. I go, 6 months. And I go, no, 6 months is a lot, because then 6 months later, you get to where I was 6 months ago, and I'm on to the next thing, or I've compounded that technology or seen one step ahead. So 6 months, maybe 6 to 12 months is a lot in the world we currently live in. So I think it's a little bit of that pattern recognition. It's a little bit of like really just trying to keep a pulse on, what's happening in the major cities, trying to be one step ahead of consumer behavior. And then after that, it's just a lot of levers. Investing in an entrepreneur and ideas is like any partnership or relationship. Nobody's perfect. You can't have it all. So you just have to make trade-offs. Of course, we espouse basic things like I'd rather have what seems like an amazing team with what seems like a pretty good idea versus what seems like an amazing idea with a pretty good team. Because I think you don't know if the idea is amazing until you get into things. But if you're sure a team's really good, I will trust them to figure it out. So that's kind of a greens fee. And then a lot of other stuff, falls into place, like the size of the market, or how quickly, we like to call it frictionless scaling. Like how fast can you get big enough before you start to have headwinds? And so if you look at things like Uber or Lyft, we were big investors in Lyft. We thought the rideshare market could get pretty far before it hit, like a regulatory hurdle or competition or things like that. And it did. So sometimes we're right.
Whether you have a good company or a good team or a good investment, I think it's pretty impossible to have a crystal ball, especially this year. What's your advice for companies trying to plan 6 months out?
Yeah, I love planning ahead because, I like chance favors the prepared, but I think we're living in a world where it used to be, even if, plan 6 months ahead, do some budgeting, do some planning. But now I think you could have gotten away with plan A and maybe plan B. Now I think you really need plan A, B, and C, or some derivation of that. So I think you really need to kind of map out your decision trees, because I don't think anyone knows where a bunch of things are going. And people at home won't be able to see me, but I kind of like to draw that circle of this is what I can control and this is what I can't control. That circle of what I can't control has gotten bigger for everyone. So you just need to have, more recovery planning or more contingency planning.
So when you plan your days, your weeks, what percentage of your day do you feel like you spend on planning?
Well, I'm a planner, as everyone will tell you. So I start my day thinking it's going to be very planned. And then I think I would say one of my favorite things for people to check out at home is Paul Graham writes these amazing articles. He's kind of a tech pioneer, and he has one article I love called Maker versus Manager Schedule. And the general gist is if you're a manager, you're having meetings with people, people are coming to you, you're going to them. That's a manager schedule. A maker schedule will be someone that's more creative and artistic. And I'll just give you the simplest example is if you're a maker and you're an artistic person, and I have this one interview with you, Sam, in the middle of the day, and I'm trying to kind of get in my creative process. I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm someone that just needs to think creatively about where my business is going. It's really hard because I wake up and I start doing it, and I'm like, oh, but I have this interview with Sam in 3 hours. Oh, I have this interview with Sam in 2 hours. I have this interview with Sam in 1 hour. It can, you think you only have one meeting, but it can block the whole day. And so it's how you construct your day that you really need to set your day up if you are a maker to have those blocks to think creatively. And I'm doing a horrible job of it at the moment, but in a perfect world, what I like to do is kind of have what I would say, like, I believe, how that first hour or two of your day goes is how the rest of your day goes. So I like to have some freedom in the morning when I can to kind of go over email, read newsletters, all that. Probably a big chunk of the middle of the day is the manager schedule meetings. And I would say it's about half and half between what I'll call strategic meetings and kind of, more, who knows, could be anything else. And in a perfect world, I would love once or twice a week to block out, late afternoon on for a long block, call it 4 to 8 p.m. because I work too much, to actually just have creative time to think strategically, go for a walk, think about things without checking email. So that's what I aspire to do. And sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't.
Right. I also aspire to be one of those people that has a very structured morning of like, okay, I have my tea. I'm a coffee person. I don't even know why I said that. This is like so hypothetical. I have my coffee, I take 10 minutes to journal, write down my thoughts, all of these things that I hear amazing people do. And sometimes you just wake up and that's just not how your day goes. So are you that structured, or are you more of like, okay, this hour I'm waking up, this hour I'm doing emails and that sort of thing, a little bit more casual?
Yeah. Well, to me, sleep is, and hopefully people are starting to get hip to the fact it should be it's a constant, not a variable, right? So I would say that depends what time I go to bed. I try to prioritize sleep over just about anything else. And then I'm not a crazy early riser because a lot of times I'm up a little later than I'd like, but I think what I try and do is leave that first 60 to 90 minutes of the day to I usually wake up to, anywhere from 75 to 100 emails. So it probably takes practically an hour to go through those. But I love things that are what I call net zero kind of dead time. So I will look at emails while I do different things. And that could be everything from stretch to, I like lots of biohacking things. I'm most people I relax with movement. So I have weird devices, as my girlfriend can tell you, like infrared saunas and cold tubs and stretch routines and all these things. So I kind of have almost an a la carte menu of things I do while I do other stuff. And of course, some things I have to be in front of my computer to respond to an email, but reading a newsletter or just going through stuff, some of it I can do. So I love to kind of have that first 90 minutes to, assess what's going on, get through the first 100 emails while I do other stuff. And then I feel like, okay, I've kind of done something no matter which way the day goes. And I find myself a little less, emotionally charged.
I'm a big multitasker. Mostly because I feel like I need 10 more hours of the day and that's the only way to get everything in. But I read all these articles about how it's really bad to multitask because you're really spending, half of your brain here, half of your brain here, instead of 100% focused all in. So what's your response to that?
Okay. I have a very specific response that I probably shouldn't admit, but I've been like you. So it used to be, oh, you focus on a task. Then it was like trendy to say you're multitasking. And I was as, I guess, bad or good, depending on your view of multitasking as anyone. I was always doing something else. I really feel it in myself that when I'm doing too many other things, you just feel yourself kind of like split minds. And for me, I've gone away from it because I do find that it's not even about the attention I'm giving the other person. If I'm being selfish, I can feel that it's like rewiring some of my synapses in a way that isn't good because it's just, I feel like, without being too technical, it is like scrambling my brainwaves in some way because I don't think that's your natural order. What I do now, which is so horrible to say, is I certainly have an amount of what I'll call kind of perfunctory things I have to do, or calls I have to be on, but not necessarily active, or the recaps or things I'm aware of. So I will multitask in the sense that I'll be on that call, but the truth is I'm probably not really overly engaged in some of these, and I'm doing something else, but I don't consider that multitasking because I almost put all my effort into the other things. So that's my new version of multitasking, but don't tell too many people other than the billions of people listening to this podcast.
Well, I got to ask, I know I can only see your shoulders to your head, but what's going on that you're multitasking right now?
No, exactly. No. So it's something that I need to do or want to do. I'm totally focused. So
gotcha. So I have your full attention right now. How's
that? I mean, only like slightly weird things like, my yoga toe spacers or something. Maybe I'll put those on, but that's not really multitasking.
Okay. Sounds good. It'll be our little secret.
Right.
So obviously N13 has made a lot of successful investments. Is there one that you're particularly most proud of?
Gosh, like they say, success has a lot of failures, father's an orphan. I don't think there's one I'm particularly proud of because there are just so many. We've exited almost 20 companies now, between what was kind of my brother and I's personal investing and now with M13. I mean, we're in hundreds of companies and there's so many I love that I wouldn't want to pick out just one. But I do think, there are, I think what's great about what we do is there's a lot of products and companies where it's not about making money. Of course, that's something that happens with success, but it's really about, a lot of the products we mentioned are things that I really think have helped a lot of people. I mean, wouldn't it be great to say you helped with food waste or helped cut carbon emissions or helped, home security or creating, neighborhood camaraderie. I mean, so it's all those things. And that's probably the most exciting thing about what we do is we really get to feel like, you can do the old do good by doing well, and they're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, that's great. And I think so many companies now are putting social justice issues and waste products and the environment at the forefront of their companies, which is really cool to see because it's not just about a product anymore. It's about, the why and the emotional connection to a product like Tom's or like other companies that have been extremely successful with this business model. But starting a company now is different than how it was 10 years ago, which is why it's so great that you guys wrote the book, Shortcut Your Startup, to help entrepreneurs navigate the startup world. In your experience, what's the difference between someone that just has a good idea and someone that has a good idea and is able to turn it into $1 billion company?
It's probably just as simple as velocity. And, people use words like speed. Speed's a fine word, but we really like the word velocity because velocity means speed with direction. And, we all have a lot of friends that work hard or they're busy, but they're maybe not heading in the right direction. So you need the velocity, the speed and the direction. And I think what's different than 10 years ago is because of, tools and technology and collaboration, you can get these companies that move with incredible velocity, incredibly fast. And probably one of my favorite chapters in our book, Shortcut Your Startup, is called Know Whether You're a Sailboat or a Speedboat. And the general gist is something like this, and there's some metaphors in here, so follow me. But is that every company you read about in the news that are these billion-dollar companies or multi-billion-dollar companies, those are speedboats. And what does a speedboat run on? Gasoline. What's gasoline? Usually money you've raised, whether that's debt or equity. And the truth is, for a vast majority of people, really you should be a sailboat, and you probably want to be a sailboat. What's a sailboat? It catches a little gust of wind, moves you forward. That gust of wind is what I call progress or some win or some sales or whatever business you're in. And then guess what? The wind dies down and you're kind of sitting out there for a few minutes. And that's called, very few companies do the hockey stick and up and to the right permanently. It's usually this kind of like gradual meandering that hopefully is up and to the right, but it's more slowly and it's ups and downs and it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And so what's changed is that some of these companies can seemingly do so well, so fast, even though that's never really how it goes behind the scenes, but based on the idea or who's backing it or how much money you have, it can go incredibly fast. But for most people, there is nothing wrong with going slower and still having velocity, but measured velocity, because that's how you build a sustainable business.
Yeah, I love that analogy. And it's so crystal clear when you explain it that way, because I think it's easy to look at these speedboat companies and be envious or wanting the success as quickly as other companies. But really, it's the long term of, can it be sustainable at that level? And is it scalable? And do you have the team in place and the policies in place to keep up with the demand? How important is scaling to companies, especially that are on that sailboat route? And what's the number one characteristic that companies need to be able to scale successfully?
Yeah, I mean, scaling is one of those words now that people use, like, I'm in a meeting. Going to the gym's not a meeting, right? Not everything's a meeting, just like not everything's scaling and not everything's meant to scale. So I would say just know what, start. Unfortunately, you have to start everything these days knowing what your end game is. And some people's end game is to sell. Some people's end game is not. We're in a business that I love called Thrasio. It's basically, they've bought up all these Amazon merchants and kind of created economies of scale. See, I use the word scale there by rolling these all together. But there's a lot of great, Amazon third-party sellers out there where the person's doing $5 million in sales, making some great money. I don't know if you can double or triple that. And I don't know that the person aspires to, but they make a very nice living doing something they love. And so that might be right for them. And for someone else, they're aiming for something much bigger. But I think the biggest thing that I see people miss on is that if you want to build something big or have the possibility to, it's the right idea at the right time in the right context. And, for it to really succeed, you kind of need all three of those. And I see a lot of businesses that find one of the three or two of the three, and they can't figure out why it didn't succeed. And even something like VeeV, I would argue, was the right idea, maybe a little ahead of its time, and mostly in the right context. But it wasn't a bullseye for all three. Or I'll give you an example we give in the book. There's a company called Kevita, Kevita. It's a probiotic drink. I was on the board for 6 years. I think when we started, nobody knew what the heck probiotics was. And so if we, probiotics was like, oh, that's something I've heard of that's in yogurt. This was a glass bottle and a beverage. I think if we tried to push it too hard, too fast, the world was not ready for probiotics. So it probably would have failed. We were very much a sailboat for a long time. And then once we realized the world was ready for it, things were selling. We had a couple great breaks with Whole Foods and other retailers. It's a matter of here's the twist and the final punch to the sailboat speedboat analogy is a sailboat can put down its sail and become and motor. Every sailboat pretty much has a motor, but once you do that, there's kind of no going back. So something like Kevita, we got to a point where we said, okay, the world's ready for this. Raise more money, spend more, push distribution, all that. But there's no going back to being a sailboat at that point. But it was the right idea at the right time, at the right context, and it was a very successful exit, and that's now probably a billion-dollar company plus.
I love that. And what I'm hearing you say is the importance of goal setting and redefining success, and that success is not always the same for every single company. How would you or M13 define success for you guys?
We're in a great place because I think we're of course, we have LPs and investors and they want to return on their money, but I think we, really want to feel like, wouldn't it be great if we were part of changing the conversation? So, we're set up as a consumer tech holding company. So there's kind of a couple parts to our business. We have this division we call Launchpad. It's kind of like a brand studio where we start our own brands and brands with other people. And then we have a venture capital fund, and about 2/3 of our headquarters employees work cross-functionally across both of them. And so, on one hand, we would love to change the face of how startups kind of partner with big companies or partner with well-known people and bring things to market. And then on the venture capital side, there's no dearth of venture capital money out there and people doing it, but we'd like to think our approach is really different. And so wouldn't it be amazing if 5-10 years from now, we were part of the conversation of how has venture capital evolved to add more value and do more good, both for the companies we invest in and just the greater good. So those are kind of our big, hairy, audacious goals.
That's a big goal, but I think you guys are off to a good start.
Thank you.
All right. So we're moving to our next segment called Ask a Friend. So for all of you listeners out there, if you're wondering how to get your question asked, just check out the website, ihavecoolfriends.com. You can see my phone number at the top and leave a message with your questions about business, wellness, and personal development. I'll curate those questions and, of course, ask our experts. So this first question is from Mandy from Texas. She says, I have lots of startup ideas. How do you know which one is going to be the winner?
Hi, Mandy from Texas. Great question. Tough answer. The short answer is you don't know. Our first belief is that you really have to kind of get in the trenches and investigate. You have to, the best thing you can do when you have a bunch of ideas is experiment. You have to try things. We kind of call it the farmer's market model. Putting in physical product terms, it's like, can you prototype something? Can you jimmy rig something? Can you just do something to test it on some small scale and then extrapolate, how you think people are responding or whatever category it's in. So I think if you have lots of ideas, it's that fine line between testing different ones, not locking in on anything. It's about test, iterate, move. But of course, at some point, you have to dive into one and go full bore. So it's doing that long enough that you think you've given things a shot, I would say. And then at some point just committing. And almost every entrepreneur I know says, had I have known then what I know now, I probably wouldn't have done it. But therein lies some of the beauty.
All right. I got a follow-up question for you. Do you have a business regret looking back over the past 12 years? Anything that you wish you could have taken back?
I'm not someone that really looks back on regrets. If I do it too hard, I'm sure I have plenty. But I think not a regret so much as, I just do feel myself feeling that entrepreneurial itch. And although I think what we're doing is very entrepreneurial now, I can't help but feel like, I get that itch to like really just go back to the innocence of 12 years ago when I kind of knew nothing, didn't have a bunch of capital, didn't know where to get it and just start something. Because there is something great about kind of doing it blindly. And so, I don't think at the time, you're just grinding and hustling and running around. Although there's a lot of fun, there's a lot of agony and angst that people don't talk about. So I wish that I hope and I think, but I also sometimes wish that I could just kind of go back to that or make sure I stop and smell the roses in that moment.
Yeah, I know that's a perfect catch-22, right? Because if you stopped to smell the roses, you probably wouldn't have been as successful as you were, right?
I'll tell you, one of my favorite quotes is from one of your local, maybe not heroes, but one of the most well-known people in Indiana, Bobby Knight, the coach. And they asked him when he went to retire, why are you retiring? And he said, well, it's pretty simple. He said, the big wins don't feel as good as they used to, and the big losses hurt even more. And that's when I knew it was kind of time to get out. And I think there's a little bit to that, right? If you don't, Kevin Plank used to always say to me, the founder of Under Armour, just don't forget to celebrate the wins, big and small, because if you just kind of get numb to those little victories, then you're just not enjoying the destination is the journey, and you're not enjoying it enough.
I've never heard that Bobby Knight quote, but I really like it. It makes sense a lot. And I feel like I felt that in my own gymnastics career too. So it's cool taking all of these lessons that you learn from different parts of your life into the current business that you're in or stage of your life. So thank you for sharing that. All right. Tony from Michigan asks, what's the most fulfilling part of your job?
Love that Tony's from Michigan. My mom's side of the family's from Northern Michigan. Shout out to Traverse City. Most fulfilling part. I think the most fulfilling part for me is one, feeling like, as I've mentioned before, you really feel like you have a chance of creating some products that could change not like hundreds of lives, but millions or maybe tens of millions of lives. Through technology, if used for good or healthy products or whatever it may be. And then two, selfishly, I love that in my current role, I think my brother and I said to ourselves, gosh, we love being entrepreneurs, but we kind of like being investors too. Let's create something that's kind of in our own vein where we can have our cake and eat it too. So to be able to say, oh, I get to some days be more of an investor and other days more of an entrepreneur. And it's kind of the virtuous cycle of being an investor has made me a better entrepreneur, and being an entrepreneur has made me a better investor. And so I love that I kind of get to wear both hats and go back and forth.
That's cool. Caroline in Florida asks, You've said that some of the best advice you've ever gotten was once you've been fortunate enough to make some money, prioritize your time over your money. How do you prioritize your time differently now?
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, one of the biggest luxuries of having some measure of success is that you can do that. Because, compare yourself to anyone in the world. What do we both have in common? We all have 24 hours in a day, and we can decide how much to work, how much to eat, how much to sleep. And so I think what's changed is just that, I'm like a very nitty gritty person. My parents are very frugal. And so they instilled a sense of that. And although I still embody a lot of those, to me, a lot of things kind of come down to value. It's not always what they cost. It's what value you get from them. And so I'm the person that sometimes will spend what for me is a lot of money and not look twice. And I'm the person that will argue about $7, not because it's $7, but because it's the value that I did or didn't get from it, the principle of it. But as time's gone on, I've tried to just say, okay, if I were to take this many hours back in my day, it kind of goes back to the maker-manager schedule. It's hard to put a value on your time per hour. Some people do it, lawyers and everything else. But I would say I now value my time in such a way that I say no to a lot more. And I used to be one of those people that the more I do, the better it will be because I'm just going. It's a constant work in progress. But I think as you get older, it's more about pruning and simplicity. So that's part of what I strive for. And so sometimes pruning something isn't about, oh, did I save an hour? It's just like I freed up an hour for who knows what, maybe nothing. And that's okay.
Yeah, I am laughing when you're saying that because that's such a goal of mine is to start saying no sometimes to things I don't want to do because I have that extrovert personality. I like doing things. I like being busy, but sometimes it would behoove me to just take a deep breath and, collect myself or recharge a little bit. So I think that's a really good lesson for everybody.
Yeah. Tim Ferriss was the first one that told me the kind of the, if it's not he says a different word, but let's say if it's not a heck yeah, it's a no, right? That has to be the bar. And it has to be like a visceral heck yeah, because his word is a little different, but very close to that heck yeah.
Right. Got it. Awesome.
You're picking up what I'm putting down, right, Sam?
I gotcha. I'm catching your drift. So first of all, I just have to say thank you for spending your time being on this podcast because obviously you're extremely busy and your time is valuable. So I appreciate that a lot. In our last segment, it's called I Have Cool Recs. So I'm going to trouble you for 4 recommendations, a book recommendation, podcast recommendation, TV show or movie recommendation, and a friend of yours that's doing something really cool and you want to brag about.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, I thought of a couple. I didn't know it was one of each, so I might have to punt on one.
You can do a couple.
Okay, I don't. TV is like I'm like just the great average American consumer. Where as long as it's not terrible, I love it, and so I watch very very little TV or Netflix because when I do, it's just totally engrosses me, and I like it all. My girlfriend told me I showed her. I was thinking about this, and she said you have to say The Last Dance because I did watch that religiously because I'm from Chicago. I grew up going to Bulls games. So that was probably my can't miss binge. For a fellow podcast compatriot, by the way, I love the name of your podcast because it's like a built-in compliment. So who can say no to that? The other podcast that I love is my friend Lewis Howes, who does School of Greatness. I think you and he have a lot in common, both background-wise and the way you approach it. But I love his podcast. I love his diversity of guests. Which leads me to my next one, because he recently had a guest who's closer to home, which is my brother's girlfriend, Paris Hilton. For anyone that hasn't checked it out, she has a documentary out right now called This Is Paris. And I will just say without spoiling too much, it's very different than what you think it's going to be about. And it's a lot about her childhood and opening up about some stuff. And I'm just really proud of her because she's been doing a lot with different petition, different groups to talk about these different things she had growing up. And so she's really trying to change, some education reform and how people think about physical, mental, verbal abuse. And so it's a big change for her and it's something she's been doing for a while, just not talking about. So it's great that it's out there in the public eye now. So I think we should definitely have her be a guest here and hopefully everyone will check out This Is Paris. And for a book recommendation, because we've talked a little bit about greater good in the planet, there's a book that I just got from my friend Christopher Marquis. I'm going to hold up here. People can't see it. But it's called Better Business, how the B Corp movement is remaking capitalism. Most people probably won't know what B Corp is, but it's a new classification of companies basically committed to, I don't know, I guess what you'd call the triple bottom line, people, profits, and planet, and that you can't just have profits without taking care of the people or the planet. Chris wrote a case study on VeeV back in the day at Harvard Business School that we're really grateful for, and that's how we met him. And I think his book, just talking about, I guess, conscious capitalism, is a great book that I hope will become, a Bible for people starting businesses going forward.
Awesome. Those are some amazing recommendations. I have a new tab on the website called Cool Recs, and I will post them all there so people can check out exactly what you're recommending to them. And then, do you have a friend that you want to hype up? I'm sure you have lots of friends and lots of people in your world doing cool stuff, but one or two people that you are just really proud of right now.
Oh gosh. Well, because that was kind of Paris. I was really proud of her because, I think people are kind of have, some people could have a view of what she was like when she was 16 or 25. And, now she's in her late 30s. So I think just really changing how she spends her time and what she focuses on. I had not planned on other friends to give a shout out to.
Well, that was a good one.
Okay, good.
You did it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of like in two categories. So I didn't know if you had another person.
Okay.
Those are great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate, all of your knowledge that you're giving our listeners and just really actionable things that people can implement in their every day, their daily life, in their companies, with their families, how they're managing their time. And you're someone that definitely gives off the vibe that you have it all figured out. So if we can all just learn from experts like you, I think we'll all be better off.
Manifest what you're going for, right?
Right.
Some days more than others.
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you again for being on the show. How can listeners follow you, find you on social media?
Well, for better or for worse, there's only one Courtney Reum out there that I'm aware of. So pretty easy to follow me on the gram, on Instagram, on LinkedIn. If you just search my name, I believe I'm the only one that comes up. And there's definitely a place on M13's website where you can just connect with us, and I assure you it'll get to me. So love to hear from anybody, and always looking to meet great people and find great ideas.
All right. Awesome. Well, I will link all of your social handles and your LinkedIn, of course. So thank you again for your time and all of your knowledge.
Thanks for having me.
And for all of you guys listening, make sure to subscribe to the podcast, leave a comment, and get in on the follow-up conversation on our Facebook, Instagram, or new YouTube channel. So again, don't forget to tune in to a new episode next week. Thank you.